She hid a secret in her hands for 161 years. A tiny piece of paper, folded so small you couldn't see it, hidden in a photograph that was supposed to show her as a happy slave. But that paper was a confession that would destroy one of the South's most powerful families. March 2024, Washington, D.C. Dr. Sarah Mitchell opened a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph from 1863. Two women, one white, wearing silk and lace, one black, wearing plain cotton. The note said, "Examine this carefully. Some things are not what they appear. The truth matters more than my name." Sarah scanned the photo, zoomed in, and her blood went cold. The black woman's hands were clasped in front of her, but between her fingers, she was holding something. A piece of paper. Hidden. Deliberate. Sarah called her colleague James. "I need forensic analysis, now." They ran facial structure tests, measured the distance between eyes, cheekbone angles, jaw shapes. The software results came back. These two women shared significant facial features. Sisters, maybe even closer. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. The white woman was enslaving her own sister. If stories like Rachel's deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. What she did with that hidden paper, it changed everything. The photograph was labeled on the back, "Caroline Ashford and her girl, Rachel. Charleston, South Carolina, March 1863. Not her servant, not her maid, her girl. Like property, like furniture." Sarah dug into records, found Caroline Ashford, wealthy plantation mistress, respected family, pillar of Charleston society. And Rachel, listed in plantation ledgers as Sarah's daughter, house servant, age 16. But there was a note in the 1855 records that made Sarah sick. "Give extra fabric this year. Master's orders. Girl looks like family. Keep her in-house, away from visitors." They knew. Robert Ashford, Caroline's father, knew Rachel looked like his legitimate daughter, because she was his daughter, born from raping an enslaved woman named Sarah, and he kept her enslaved anyway. His own child, working in his house, serving his legitimate family, invisible. Then Sarah found the anonymous donor's email. "The paper Rachel is holding still exists. I have it. Come to Charleston. The truth is more extraordinary than you realize." Sarah and James flew to Charleston, met in a private archive room. An anonymous box was delivered. Inside were documents, Caroline's diary, letters, a family Bible, and wrapped in tissue paper, the piece of paper from the photograph. Sarah unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a confession, written in shaky handwriting. "I, Robert Ashford, being of sound mind, acknowledge that Rachel, daughter of Sarah, is my natural daughter, born of my body, and is kin by blood to my legitimate daughter Caroline. God forgive me for the evil I have done." April 7, 1863. A signed confession from a dying man admitting he'd enslaved his own daughter. But here's what made Sarah's heart race. Caroline's diary explained how Rachel got that paper. Robert Ashford, on his deathbed, called Rachel to his study, told her the truth, gave her the confession, asked for her forgiveness. And Rachel? She took that paper, and during the 1863 photograph session, while being forced to pose as Caroline's happy servant, she hid her father's confession in her hands, right there in the photo. A silent scream, frozen in time. But Sarah found something else in those documents, something that changed the entire story. Rachel didn't just escape after the Civil War and live quietly. Oh no, Rachel came back. And what she did to the Ashford family, it was perfect revenge. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Rachel was justified in what she did next? Because what happens in Act 2 will make you feel her rage. Let me tell you about the hell Rachel lived through. because you need to understand why she came back for revenge. Rachel was born in 1847. Her mother Sarah was 20 years old, enslaved. And Robert Ashford, the respectable plantation owner, he raped her repeatedly. Rachel grew up knowing she looked different. Lighter skin, features that matched the white family, and everyone knew why. But nobody said it out loud. When Rachel was 8 years old, she started working in the main house, serving meals, cleaning rooms, and here's the sick part. She was serving her own sister. Caroline was 13 years older, treated Rachel like furniture, never acknowledged they shared a father, never showed a moment of kindness. Sarah found Caroline's diary entries from the 1850s. The girl Rachel is adequate at her duties, though I find her eyes unsettling. She watches me in a way that makes me uncomfortable. Father says I'm being silly. Rachel was watching, learning, remembering every cruelty, every dismissal, every moment she was treated as less than human by her own blood. Then in 1860, Rachel's mother Sarah died. She was only 33 years old. The plantation records just said, deceased, September 1860. No cause, no funeral, no grave marker. Rachel was 13, and she was alone. Left in a house with the man who raped her mother and the sister who enslaved her. Robert Ashford never acknowledged Rachel, never spoke to her directly. She was invisible to him. Until 1863, he was dying, heart failing, and suddenly he got religious, scared of judgment, wanted to make peace with his sins. March 1863, he called Rachel to his study. She thought she was in trouble, but instead, he told her the truth. "You're my daughter. Caroline is your sister. I've sinned against you and your mother. I'm writing this down. Take this paper. It's all I can give you." Rachel stood there, 16 years old, holding a confession from the man who owned her, the man who was her father. And you know what she felt? Not gratitude, not forgiveness, rage. Because a piece of paper didn't free her. It didn't bring her mother back. It didn't erase 16 years of being treated like property by her own family. A week later, Robert forced the family to take that photograph, to show Christian kindness to our people, he said. Rachel had to wear a dress made from Caroline's old clothes, had to stand there and play the role of the happy slave. But she took that confession paper, folded it tiny, and hid it in her hands during the photo. Her act of defiance, her evidence, her proof that everything in that image was a lie. Caroline's diary from April 1863 revealed she found out the truth after the photo. "Father told me Rachel is my half-sister. I'm horrified. But what can I do? I cannot free her. The scandal would destroy us. So I do nothing. And I feel the weight of my cowardice every day." Do nothing. That's what Caroline chose. Comfort over justice, reputation over humanity. Her own sister remained enslaved. Rachel watched Robert Ashford die in 1865. She watched the Civil War end, and when the 13th Amendment was ratified in December 1865, Rachel walked out, took her few belongings, took that confession paper, and left. Caroline wrote in her diary, "Rachel has left. I should be angry, but I'm relieved. Perhaps now I can forget." Forget. Like Rachel was just an inconvenient memory. But here's what Caroline didn't know. Rachel wasn't walking away to forget, she was walking away to prepare. Because Rachel had made a promise to herself. a promise she'd keep for the next 30 years. One day, I'll come back, and I'll make them all pay, not just for me, for my family, for every person they enslaved, for every lie they told. I'll destroy the Ashford name, and they'll never see me coming. What Rachel did next took 30 years of planning, where she becomes the hunter. Stay with me. 1865. Rachel walked out of Charleston with nothing but the clothes on her back and her father's confession. She was 18 years old, traumatized, alone, but not broken. She headed north, Philadelphia, the city where thousands of freed slaves were rebuilding their lives. And Rachel? She got to work. First, she'd learned to read properly. She'd learned basic literacy in secret as a child, but now she devoured books. History, law, politics. By 1870, she was teaching at a school for black children. By 1875, she was writing for black newspapers under a pen name. Articles about plantation owners who'd escaped justice, about the continued exploitation of freed slaves through debt peonage and sharecropping. She was studying her enemies, learning how they operated, how they protected each other, how the system shielded them. In 1872, Rachel married Joseph Freeman, a Union Army veteran who'd fought for black freedom. She told him everything, showed him the confession paper, and Joseph said something that changed everything. If you want justice, you need evidence, not just for your family, for all the families they destroyed. So Rachel and Joseph started documenting. They worked with the Freedmen's Bureau, collected testimonies from former slaves, gathered records of plantation crimes, built files on wealthy Southern families who'd committed atrocities during slavery and were now living respectably. The Ashford name was at the top of Rachel's list. By 1880, Rachel had 3 children, a teaching career, respect in her community. Everyone thought she'd moved on, built a peaceful life. But in her home, in a locked drawer, she kept expanding her files. Letters, documents, testimonies, evidence that Robert Ashford had sold families apart, had beaten people to death, had raped dozens of enslaved women besides Rachel's mother. And Caroline? Rachel discovered Caroline had inherited the plantation after Robert died, and she'd continued exploiting black workers through fraudulent debt contracts, making them work for nothing, stealing their labor just like her father had. In 1885, Rachel's oldest son, Robert, asked her, "Mama, why do you keep all those papers about the Ashford family? Why can't you just let it go?" And Rachel said something that made him understand. "Because, baby, some debts don't disappear with time, they grow. And the Ashford family owes a debt to hundreds of people. I'm going to make sure they pay." 1890. Rachel was 43 years old. Her children were grown. Joseph supported her completely, and she made her decision. "I'm going back to Charleston, not as Rachel Ashford Freeman, as someone they'll never recognize, and I'm going to destroy them." She changed her name to Rebecca Allen, posed as a widow from Philadelphia, educated, refined, respectable. She moved to Charleston and opened a school for black children, became active in church communities, made connections with reformers, journalists, black lawyers, and slowly, carefully, she got close to Charleston's black community members who still worked for the Ashford family and other plantation families. She gathered more evidence, current crimes, ongoing exploitation, and she waited for the perfect moment. Because Rachel knew revenge isn't just about anger, it's about timing. It's about building a case so solid that your enemies can't escape. It's about making sure when you strike everywhere at once. By 1895, Rachel was ready. She had 30 years of evidence. She had witnesses ready to testify. She had journalists ready to publish. She had lawyers ready to file. And Caroline Ashford Petton? She had no idea that the nice widow Mrs. Allen running the black school was her sister, the sister she'd enslaved, the sister who'd spent 30 decades preparing to annihilate her family's legacy. The strike was coming, and it would be perfect. Rachel waited 30 years. Act 4 is where she finally strikes. And what she does, it's brilliant. September 1895, Charleston. Rachel made her move, and it was devastating. She'd spent 10 years back in Charleston as Rebecca Allen, trusted, respected, connected, and now she activated everything. First strike, the newspapers. Rachel had been secretly working with Northern journalists for years, reformers who wanted to expose ongoing exploitation in the South. On September 15, 1895, the New York Tribune published a massive exposé, Charleston's Shame, How Wealthy Families Continue Slavery Through Debt Peonage. The article named names: the Ashford family, the Peyton family, 8 other prominent Charleston families. It included testimony from 47 former slaves. It included documents showing fraudulent debt contracts. And it included a photograph, the 1863 image of Caroline Ashford Peyton with her enslaved half-sister, Rachel. Robert Ashford raped Rachel's mother and enslaved his own daughter. The Ashford family has never acknowledged this crime. Second strike, the legal attack. Rachel had worked with black lawyers and Freedmen's Bureau investigators. On September 16th, they filed 17 lawsuits: fraud, theft, illegal debt peonage, assault. Each lawsuit represented a family destroyed by the Ashford plantation. Each one had evidence, documents Rachel had spent 30 years collecting. The Charleston courts tried to dismiss them, but Rachel had been smart. She'd also filed with federal courts. And Northern judges, they were done protecting Southern plantation families. Third strike, the social destruction. Rachel revealed her true identity. At a public meeting at her school, she stood before a crowd of 200 people, black families, white reformers, journalists, and she said, "My name is not Rebecca Allen. My name is Rachel Ashford Freeman. I was born enslaved by Robert Ashford. I was forced to serve my own sister Caroline. I hold my father's written confession, acknowledging I am his daughter. And for 30 years, I have been gathering evidence of the crimes committed by the Ashford family and their associates. Today, I present that evidence to the world." She held up the confession paper, the same paper she'd hidden in the photograph 32 years earlier. The room erupted. Journalists rushed to copy it. Photographers captured her holding it. The image went viral, 1895 style, reprinted in newspapers across the country. Caroline Ashford Peyton's response? Panic. She denied everything at first, called Rachel a liar, threatened lawsuits. But then, Rachel's lawyers presented Caroline's own diary in court. The entries where Caroline admitted Rachel was her sister, where she wrote about their father's confession, where she acknowledged she chose social standing over freeing her own blood. The evidence was undeniable. The legal battles lasted 2 years, but Rachel won. By 1897, the Ashford plantation was seized and subdivided. Portions were given to black families whose ancestors had been enslaved there. Caroline lost 2/3 of her wealth, paying legal judgments and reparations. 8 associate families were similarly destroyed. Their names became toxic in Charleston society. And Caroline Ashford Peyton? She lived another 8 years, but she lived in disgrace. Her friends abandoned her. Her church asked her to leave. She died in 1905, age 71, alone and shamed. Her obituary in the Charleston paper was 3 sentences. Meanwhile, Rachel's obituary in 1912 was half a page. Rachel Ashford Freeman, educator, activist, and champion of justice, died surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She dedicated her life to exposing the crimes of slavery and securing reparations for its victims. She never forgot where she came from, and she never stopped fighting. But here's the best part. That confession paper? Rachel donated it to the Freedmen's Bureau archives in 1900 with a note. I held this paper in my hands during a photograph in 1863 when I was enslaved by my own family. I hold it again today, free and victorious. May it serve as evidence for future generations that justice, even delayed, is still justice. Rachel lived to be 65. She saw her grandchildren grow up. She saw the black school she founded thrive. She saw the Ashford name become synonymous with shame instead of prestige. She didn't just survive. She didn't just escape. She destroyed them. Legally, socially, completely. And she did it with patience, intelligence, and evidence. Not violence, not revenge killing, but something better. She erased their legacy and replaced it with truth. Rachel's story ends here. And trust me, the discovery in 2024 makes this even more powerful. Don't go anywhere. Washington, D.C., Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood in front of the press conference with tears in her eyes. Behind her, projected on a massive screen, was the 1863 photograph. Caroline in silk, Rachel in cotton, and between Rachel's clasped hands, barely visible, the confession paper that destroyed a family. For 161 years, Sarah said, her voice shaking, this photograph has existed in private collections. Most people who saw it thought it was just another plantation propaganda image. But Rachel Ashford Freeman left us a message. She hid the evidence of her father's crime in plain sight. And then she spent 30 years making sure that evidence mattered. The exhibition at the Smithsonian was titled Rachel's Revenge: How One Woman Destroyed Slavery's Legacy. It included everything. The original 1863 photograph with magnified views showing the hidden paper. The confession itself, preserved in archival glass. Caroline's diary with the entries about Rachel. The 1895 newspaper exposés. Court documents showing the lawsuits. The family Bible where Rachel had written her own name into the Ashford family record before leaving in 1865. Photographs of Rachel from 1890 and 1910, showing her transformation from enslaved girl to powerful educator and activist. And most powerfully, DNA test results from 2024. Sarah had found descendants. From Rachel's side, James Freeman, a retired history professor in Baltimore, and Dr. Patricia Freeman Johnson, a physician in Atlanta. From Caroline's side, Elizabeth Petton Harrison, an attorney in Charleston. The DNA confirmed it. 99.9% certainty. Rachel and Caroline were sisters. James Freeman spoke at the press conference. My great-great-grandmother told us stories. She said our ancestor Rachel had been enslaved by her own white family. But she said Rachel didn't just escape, she destroyed them. We thought it was exaggerated, family legend. But it's all true. Every word. Rachel kept receipts, literal receipts, for 30 years. Patricia Freeman Johnson added, Rachel had every reason to become bitter, to give up, to just try to forget and move on. But she refused. She said justice delayed is not justice denied, it's justice preparing. And when she was ready, she struck with the force of 30 years of righteous anger. The white descendant, Elizabeth Petton Harrison, stood at the podium looking devastated. I grew up hearing about my distinguished ancestor Caroline Ashford Petton, respected plantation mistress, pillar of Charleston society. No one ever mentioned she enslaved her own sister. No one mentioned the exploitation, the fraud, the crimes. Our family buried this history, but Rachel made sure it couldn't stay buried. She documented everything. And now, 112 years after her death, the truth is finally complete. I'm ashamed of my ancestors, but I'm grateful Rachel existed, because some truths need to be told, no matter how painful. The exhibition showed Rachel's final photograph from 1910. She was 63 years old, sitting in a chair surrounded by her 3 children and 7 grandchildren. She looked peaceful, strong, free. The caption read, "Rachel Ashford Freeman, 1847-1912. Born enslaved by her own father, freed herself at 18. Spent 30 years building a legal case that destroyed her oppressors, lived to see justice served, died surrounded by family who loved her. She didn't just survive slavery, she defeated it." But Sarah had found one more document, Rachel's personal journal from 1900. The final entry, written when Rachel was 53 years old, was displayed on the exhibition wall in huge letters. "People ask me if I'm bitter, if I'm angry that I spent my childhood enslaved by my own family. Here's my answer. I was bitter. I was angry. For years. But then I realized bitterness is what they wanted. They wanted me broken, silenced, forgotten. So I chose something else. I chose to document, to educate, to build a case so solid they couldn't escape it. And when I was ready, I struck. I destroyed the Ashford name. I secured reparations for 47 families. I made sure the truth was written in court records, newspapers, and history books where it can never be erased. That's not bitterness, that's justice, and it's victory. I am 53 years old. My children are educated and free. My grandchildren will grow up knowing their great-grandmother was enslaved, but also knowing that she fought back and won. I held my father's confession in my hands when I was 16, pretending to be a happy slave for a photograph. I hold that same paper today as a free woman who destroyed her oppressors. If that's not victory, I don't know what is." The exhibition traveled to 12 cities. Millions of people saw Rachel's photograph, saw the hidden paper, learned her story, understood that resistance doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like a teenage girl hiding evidence in a photograph. Sometimes it looks like 30 years of patient documentation. Sometimes it looks like a woman who refused to let her oppressors forget what they'd done. And sometimes revenge is cold, legal, and perfect. Rachel's story proves that justice can take decades, but it's worth it. If her story moved you, subscribe now. Share this with someone who needs to know that patience and intelligence can defeat even the most powerful oppressors. Next video, the enslaved woman who poisoned 3 plantation owners and walked away free. You won't believe how she did it. Hit that notification bell. Rachel's legacy deserves to be remembered. Make sure it is.